The for somebody like me, or anybody that was an ordinary kid growing up, you played baseball or hockey, and you had the odd fist fight or whatever, and all of a sudden you're into a square box where you're told what to do, when to do it, and if not, you're punished for it, which was true. We had, in Deep Brook, we had a square that was like, had to be a half a mile wide and half a mile long. You're not allowed to cross that unless you run. And if you went someplace to walk all the way around, it took you 15, 20 minutes. So if you tried to get across and you walked, punishment. What's your punishment? A Lee Enfield rifle weighed 20 or 30 pounds. You have it like this here, and you stand like this here, and you stand like that for 15, 20 minutes, and your arms are going to fall off. And you don't want to drop the gun, you'll drop it on your toes. So you have it like this, you're half dead. All right, Glassman, secure. What happens that you meet people, see, St. John's, Newfoundland was a very, very poor colony, very poor. It was like a lot of homes had no running water, believe it or not. Some of the kids never got shoes till they were 12 or 13 years old. It's true. This is actually, I lived there, I saw it. And the main thing that the girls wanted there was to marry a Canadian, to become a Canadian. I mean, we were also like a colony, but not like them. It was a very, very poor country, St. John, Newfoundland, very poor. So the girls that you went out with there had one thing in mind, they wanted to get married, you know. So I did some dancing, but very little apart from that. I did some dancing in London, but
Jitterbug.
inclined to be too talkative and sometimes cheeky. A very hard worker doing a good job ending is told to do, a good seaman and a very good helmsman, but too talkative, very cheeky. I was. No, that was written by Gardner, Lieutenant Gardner. He was my ship's officer when they transferred with other shippers. It's difficult because it's, number one, the Atlantic is never really warm. And we always just take the northern route, which doesn't get up as far north as Iceland, but the northern route is cold as the dickens. And Londonderry is in Northern Ireland, and you like that, and it's cold. It's just across from Scotland, and northern Scotland is wicked. And the winters were very, very difficult. You had storms, and I got caught once in a crow's nest. It was difficult. You never took the southern route, because the southern route was basically where more of the submarines were hanging around, rather than the northern route that was very difficult for them as well, because they were in a steel cage and the water out there was freezing. It took, if you had nothing to do, it would take about 3 days to cross, but it never took you 3 days to cross. Number one, the ships that you were escorting could only go about 10 or 12 miles an hour. They're going to go by 8, 10, 12, 15 knots an hour, and you're traveling like 3,000 miles, so it took a while. Boredom was never such, because if you had time off, you played cards or whatever it was. And one day a week, you got to make and mend, which means you do your washing, your laundry, if there's any sewing, and I learned how to sew then. I sew very well today, because when I was 19, I had to sew up my own clothes. So. But life really was good if you came out okay. My friend didn't come out okay. He was in the hospital for close to 8 years, and 3 years later he died. Mike died, he was 31. He was my brother. if you're lucky, it came out okay, you're blessed. The things that we had that were not comfortable, you slept at sea with your clothes on. You never took your clothes off, never, except the shower. You stuffed your clothes on in your hammock, you had your boots and your life jacket below the hammock, and you never took your clothes off. But you had to make sure that you took 3 or 4 showers a week, because otherwise you smelled, and your clothes had to be washed every week, like you had changes and whatnot. The problem is with taking a shower in the North Atlantic, the water is cold. It's also salty. So when you turn on the shower and the salty cold water hits you, it wakes you up. Believe me, it wakes you up. On spare time, we cleaned, we scrubbed, we washed, and on this destroyer, we had the main deck where the officers were. The wood was beautiful, rubbed down, scrubbed. It's like you could eat off it. And what happened that every 3 or 4 weeks, one of the seamen was sent up to wash it down, scrub it down. So what you had was seawater and pus or soap, which was not the best yet. And you washed, you scrubbed, and there were always 3 or 4 officers around and whatnot. It was very uncomfortable. When I got up there, I'm moving here, I'm moving there, I said, this is not for me. It's a true story. I took my thumb, took the brick, cracked my thumb, and it was bleeding. Sir, I had an axe in my thumb. Glassman, all right, go. They'll get somebody up. They send somebody else up. He says to me, how'd you get out of it? What'd you do? I said, I cracked my thumb. I says, I'm amongst 3 or 4. You're kidding? No. Oh, so he went up. He cracked his thumb, and that was the end of going up to the deck and holy stoning the deck with pus or soap and with salty water. Anyway, that's one of these things. We had some characters. We had a guy called Sagan, French-Canadian guy, great guy. And under the torpedo tubes, you had to go and you had to wipe it and clean it. And one day he's under the torpedo tubes, and I think it was Garner walks by, and he sees his boots sticking out. He kicks his boots. He says, what are you doing there? You've been in there for a half hour. So Sagan says, I got 2 speeds, boss, slow and stop. True story. Very unusual to say that. He says 2 speeds. The letters, the letters that we used to get when we were in training they were precious. They were precious. And my friend Michael was going out with a girl since they were young kids, you know. And one day we're invited to Captain D's dinner. Every year, Captain, mainly for the officers, whatnot. And some of the girls were invited, and we were invited along. Mike says, I'm going to the dinner. I said, I'm going to tell Pat. You wouldn't? Oh, yeah, Mike. You're going out on a date. Icky, you wouldn't do that to me. Yeah. Listen, Pat, hey, forget it. Okay. I wrote letters to 2 girlfriends, and I never got a Dear John letter. Dear John letter was very famous because Israel, I have to tell you something. I'm going out with somebody right now. It looks serious. I won't be able to write you anymore. Mike, what happened? Mike, I'm going to cry. Why? There'll be no letters coming from her. But she knows some friends of mine back there. Why not? She met a guy. You're kidding. Did Pat write you yet? No. She'll write you. She'll meet a guy. Get out. Pat, no. We were 2 instances. One we sunk, and the other was captured. And the one who was captured, they blew the captain's head off because he tried to do something. No, death charges were like, they were set to go down about 300 feet and then they'd explode. And then...
Further proof that Britannia still rules the waves. All these ships are sailing the seas under the protection of the Royal Navy, assisted in this particular instance by a Polish destroyer. A plane has spotted a submarine lurking in the depths. She signals the protecting naval craft and drops a smoke bomb to indicate the position of the U-boat. To the Polish ship falls the honor of attacking the enemy, while the British naval vessels keep their eyes on the convoy. And that's the first pill. And now for a big one. Watch. And from aircraft and ship, they watch a patch of oil spreading on the surface of the sea. It means that another enemy submarine has gone to join the others in Davy Jones's locker. It also means that yet another convoy makes port safely, thanks to the Royal Navy and our allies.
And then we had a new thing that came up. They're like little bombs that went ahead of the ship and the thing reversed. There was a dozen of them, and we had 3 guys loading these things. They were about this high, little propellers, and they shot up and the ship backed up, they exploded and whatnot. The biggest farce we had was in the channel. Our Aztec, which was the anti-submarine, got a ping. There's something down there, metal and whatnot. So we started depth charges, and we spent hours on it, hours. And then a chair floated to the top. A chair. It's probably an old steamboat that was going back and forth. Then it sunk there, and everybody was cursing and swearing because it took about 70 hours until the darn thing came out. That was the only stupid thing that we really did. A month before D-Day, we came across 3 motor torpedo boats in the channel that were trying to wind their way in, and we sunk one, chased the other 2, and we were lucky because a torpedo, they got it in there, missed us by about 10 feet. If it would have been 10 feet this way, we'd have been blown to hell. And it was difficult because they had armed trawlers coming out of Brest and Saint Nazaire, and the Athabascan, I think I have a piece on that, was sunk by one of the armed trawlers, and the Haida blew that one up, and then they had to get out of there. They lost about 80-odd seamen went down, including the Captain Stubbs, because he waved the Haida off. He said, don't hang around because you're just outside the German port, and they'll be coming for you. There were things happening, and it's hard to say, like you're sitting, and all of a sudden one of these V1s is coming down. What they had a little light bulb at the back of this thing, and when the light bulb went out, those were the V1s, you knew it was coming down. One was coming right down for us, and we blew it up about 1,500 feet above us. It would have hit us. Goodbye. We're very lucky that way. And whatever we did was fortunate. The Corvette I was supposed to have taken was sunk between Port-au-Basque and Newfoundland and Sydney, Nova Scotia. First trip out. If I'd have been on that Corvette, I wouldn't be here today. So luck had a lot to do with what happened to you. We had ships next to us that were blown up, and we were lucky. When D-Day started, it was all you saw was fire. You looked at the coast, and it was just red fire. This friend of mine, Donnie Gaskin, Jewish guy, came through North Africa, Italy, died on the beaches. Another friend of mine did the same thing, came home fine. And they were together. It's just luck. If you're lucky, you got out without too much damage. The thing that killed me, I still have nightmares occasionally. There was a hospital ship coming back from France to England about a month, 3 weeks or a month after D-Day, and was loaded with personnel. No arms, no legs, blind as that. And it was sunk before it got to England. we had to get out of there. We were too big a ship, and the screws at the back of the ship would have chewed these people up. So we couldn't do a thing to save them. And all they had were little bumboats coming out of England, out of Portsmouth and Plymouth, to pick up as many as they could. But you took a look at the faces and you had to leave them, and that had got me.
And that would be so.
We landed in Ireland, and we came ashore, and Ernie and Beattie were good friends, and we landed ashore, and they had the NAFTY there, and NAFTY girls there. They gave us chocolate bars and everything like this here. So we're walking along, and this girl had to be about 6'3", 6'4". She says to me, "Come here, my little Canadian sailor boy," to me. So I walk over, she starts giving me chocolate bars, and Ernie says, "Grab him, grab him, grab him, grab him. We're going to grab him, grab the chocolate bars." My little Canadian sailor boy. That was good. Ireland was, we had a riot there where he turned out the police, and we had some of our school arrested. It was at a dance, they had scuffles. It happened. You made friendships, some of them lasted for years if you were in the same area. And they're the type of friendships that you don't really, it's very difficult to make when you're like you are, you live here, you live there, whatever. It's not quite the same. And it's like you're back. You know, you're going somewhere, you got somebody going to look after your back. I'll look after your back. And you form friendships that lasted your life. I had a Greek fellow, John Kritikos, went into the 2nd Battalion Black Watch in end of 1942. He went Africa, Italy, France, married a Dutch girl, fine. Donnie Gaskin, Jewish friend, they enlisted at the same time, went exactly to the same places, landed exactly at the same spot on the beaches in D-Day. Donnie Gaskin got killed, and Johnny Kritikos just died like about a year and a half ago. He was 91. So you have to be lucky, basically. I went to cells once for a couple of days for an infraction with Ernie Grundy, and I got involved with a couple of guys in the shore. But that was just one of these things. This guy, Ernie Grundy, was a football player from Regina, and we became good friends. We got leave after close to 80 days at sea in Plymouth. Nobody had money. I'm the only one who had money. I had about 60 or 70 shillings on me. It was a pound or something. Ernie, what do you want to do? Seal, what do you want to do? Let's go to London. There's no money. We'll take the train. I'll pay, okay. Took the train to London, and the leave was up the next morning. It was just for the day leave. We got into London, and these V1 rockets were coming down, pretty good. So we get into the Canadian Club in London. And I haven't fathomed this thing till today. So we sit down, we grab a bite, and they bring us a tomato. A tomato. We hadn't seen a tomato for months. There's 3 of us. How do you cut it? You cut it in half, you cut it in quarters. You can't cut a tomato properly in 3. So I called over the guy that runs the club, and I said, "Do me a favor, there's 3 of us. We want to share this tomato equally. How do you cut it?" He said, "You can't cut it in 3. You cut it in 4, you cut it in 2. He says, "Cut it in 4, and the 4th piece share among the 3. So that's what we had to do. Until today, I cannot cut a tomato properly in 3. I have to cut it in half or cut it in 4s. My wife gives me hell.